That said, I'm going to pass you over.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. Really good turnout. I'm actually finding these IR35 events are being really well attended because you guys, it is affecting you. They are really important, so thank you for coming, but it is well worth you being here, I promise you, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a really good understanding, one, what IR35 is, two, how it's going to affect you, and three, anything you can do about it. We'll hopefully also bust some of the rumours or the myths that you've all had, because traditionally I've done over 600 contractor events so far like this, whether it's to end clients, agencies or yourself, and presented to roughly over 600 contractors. So I've heard some terrible advice, I've heard some people that really know what they're doing, so it's a really mixed bag. So hopefully by the end of this you'll really go away understanding, and if not, come and ask me at the end. While I go through this, I think the best way it's worked most of the time is that if you have any questions, I'll sort of go through a slide and discuss it, but then put your hand up and ask as we go along, instead of waiting until the end, and we'll get through it together. So, as I said, I'm Sean.Mackenzie, so I am from Parasol Clear Sky, so we are the biggest contracting accountancy firm in the UK, so this is really important to us. As Anthony said, I'm not going to sell Parasol, I'm not going to sell Umbrella, we will talk about it because it is something you'll need to discuss. But just coming from our point of view, we look after 34,000 limited contractors like yourself, and we want to keep those 34,000 limited if we can. So we actually don't want everyone to go inside. There's no doubt that we will win business from this, but at the end of the day, we actually want to keep those 34 happy and as we can. So we're passionately driving companies to do this correctly and put people outside if you can be outside. So you'll hear me going on about what's inside, what's outside. So we'll get to that first. But what we will do is we'll go through what IR35 is. We'll go through what the current rules are. We're going to go through the changes of what's going to come in April. And then we'll talk about the private sector briefly. We'll talk about the learnings from that because there are a lot. And then most importantly, how to prepare. So how you guys can get ready and how the agencies are getting ready. So what is IR35? Now just before we get onto this, I always do this with contractors. Can anyone put their hand up if they're confident that they are outside at present? Does anyone know whether they're in or out? So would most of you say you're not sure? Is that fair to say? Yes. Okay, that's normally the gist. So I'll get you to do that at the end and then see where you are afterwards, which is always interesting. So IR35 has actually been around for 20 years and the rules aren't changing. So the rules have always been for you guys as contractors to make the decision of whether you're inside this rule or outside it. Now IR35 came in 20 years ago because there was too much of a common trend of contractors or staff members leaving work on a Friday as an employed person and coming back on the Monday doing exactly the same job but saying I'm now a contractor, pay me through my limited company. So there's a huge trend in this. So 20 years ago HMRC decided actually we're seeing too much of this, we're losing a lot of revenue. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce IR35, which will give some clear parameters around whether you're inside, so you're deemed as an employee, or as HMRC, but I hate it, they call you a disguised employee, or you are a true contractor. So if you're inside IR35, deemed as an employee, that means you should be paying the tax, so your national insurances, that's employers and employees, and your tax. If you're outside of IR35, then you have control over your taxes. So you would traditionally have a limited company, go through your accountant and pay yourself dividends in the most tax efficient way that you can. So that's really the difference. Inside you're employed and your tax has to be that way. Outside you have to pay, or you can pay yourself as a contractor and enjoy the dividend breaks. So as I said, introduced 20 years ago. However, it worked for about 6 months, and then after that, suddenly everybody new came onto the market. Now, if you traditionally start up as a new contractor and you speak to someone like Union Jackson, they'll pass you to somebody like us and a contractor accountancy provider, and we'll give you both options. We'll give you the umbrella option, and then we'll give you the limited option. So you can traditionally earn a lot more for your limited company. So we give you both options, and naturally everyone goes, well, that one's netting me £600 more a month. That's the one I'm going to go for. So we would mention to you about maybe you're inside IR35, but it's always been up to you to make that decision. So 3 years ago, HMRC saw that there was a huge trend in everyone going limited again. They weren't choosing the other options where necessarily they maybe should have. So they decided 3 years ago what they're going to do is they're going to try it out in the public sector first, but they're going to take the decision making away from the contractors. At present, there's 1.2 million contractors out there in the marketplace, and there's only about 30 to 34 IR35 inspectors for HMRC. So you guys are just very much safe in the numbers. Even if you're operating inside, you're extremely unlucky if HMRC look at you. So they decided we can't penetrate into that 1.2 million people. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the decision making away from the contractor, who is, by decision, you're the best place to decide whether you're in and out, but they're going to take that away. So what they've done is they've decided to move that over to the end client, makes the decision, and then the agency advertises such, inside or outside. So what makes up IR35? So we're going to run through that now. There we go. So IR35 is really around these areas here. So there's through case law 20 years ago, there's 3 pillars that we call them 3 irreducible minimums. So these are the 3 areas where you have to be inside or outside IR35. So if you can demonstrate that you have right of substitution, no mutuality of obligation, and control, then you can show that actually I'm a contractor who's working outside of IR35 correctly, and I'm going to pay myself in a certain way that I'm paying myself. So we'll run through them one by one, just so you have an idea of what they each are. So the first one is right of substitution. So what that means is, as contractors, you should have the right to be able to substitute somebody in. So if you are not able to continue the contract, and you're going to go away for 4 weeks, or even 2 weeks, or even a day, and you want that contract to carry on, then you would say to one of your fellow contractors who can do the same role as you, I'm going to bring you in for the day or 2 weeks to carry on that project whilst I go and do whatever I need to do. Now, in reality, have any of you ever brought a substitute in for your work? No one? No, it just doesn't happen. Nobody ever brings a substitute in, but it's such an important part of IR35. Now, you don't have to exercise that right to substitute, but it needs to be there for you to have a right to say, I am going to bring a substitute in. Now, as you can understand, end clients are pretty uncomfortable with the idea of that. They traditionally have brought you into the company, but what you need to prove is that it's not a business to personal relationship. They're not getting your skills, they're going business to business, and that's the difference between being a contractor and being an employed person, is that you can demonstrate actually it's a company and I'm going to bring someone else in. Now, some of the reasons why you would never brought a substitute in: number one, it's up to you to find a substitute. Now, a good thing to do today, if you don't think of anyone who can have a substitute, speak to someone in the room, get their name. It is very helpful, even before April now, if HMRC said to you, who would be your substitute, if you could go, well, it's Craig. So yeah, try and get each other's numbers, it does generally help. The second thing around right of substitution for the contractor is, if you found that substitute, you would have to pay them from your limited account. So agency would pay you, or the contract end client would pay you, and then you pay them yourself. So a bit of a nightmare for you to do. So in the real world, traditionally, if you can't fulfill a project, you just say, actually, I'm walking away because I need to go do something else, etc. And then the agency would bring somebody else in. So that's the right of substitution. Any questions around that at all? The biggest thing with right of substitution, as I said, is that end client is concerned about it because they think that contractors are going to be coming in and you're going to be replacing each other. The truth is that it never happens. So you do need to have the right to be able to substitute, to have IR35. One of the things that you will see end clients do, though, is put some caveats on that, which are understandable. So you need to be as equally qualified. You will go through the same vetting process. Things that you would expect to do if you were going in there anyway, they'll put those caveats in there and they're fine. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
So would you, the person you're substituting, you pay as an employee of your company?
They could be a limited company as well, and you would just pay them it would go into yours and out. But yeah, technically you would have to pay them whatever agreement you have.
They're doing it. So
normally you might take a cut, but yeah. Okay. Okay. So right of substitution really is HMRC's almost their golden egg around these rules, because, as I said, the end clients don't really want to give it to you, and you guys don't really ever exercise it, but it's such a key part. So you'll find that it will be in the contract, and if you want an outside role, you're going to need to make sure your end client puts that into the contract. The second one is mutuality of obligation. So this one's a lot easier. It only takes 2 seconds to go through. So one thing you will see as contractors is you'll start to see less notice periods. So I know in your sector, actually, you're normally only in there for short-term periods anyway, so you wouldn't see much of a notice period. if any at all. But in an ideal IR35 world, there wouldn't be a notice period, because any notice period implies obligation. It shows that you're obligated to stay there, or they're obligated to keep you for a week or a month or however long it is. But you will see those reduce in longer term contracts. The other part around obligation is what you all already do. So if it's a 3-month contract or a day contract, you carry on, you do that work, and then you leave. There's no obligation for the contractor or for you guys to stay working there, or for them to continually give you work. It's, we finished what we're doing, we're going to walk away. The same if it was a 6-month contract and it ended in 4 months because you completed all the work, you should both be able to walk away. You wouldn't hold the contract for another 2 months. So obligation is nice and easy. Any questions? That one's always much quicker. So those two that I've mentioned are quite black and white. They're very much in the contract. Yes?
I do have a question just back on the last one, just reading the last point.
Yeah.
Is it really based on time and body of work? So if I was employed for 6 months
Yeah.
and finished in 4 months, would they still, because it's a body of work, would they still be paying me for the 6 months of that work, or 4 months?
No, it should be for the body of work. Ultimately is the key here. So the time is almost irrelevant, especially in your sector. So a lot of the time you'll be only doing week or day assignments, whereas it could go up to a year or 6 months. Actually, the time doesn't really make a difference. It's all about what you're doing in that workplace. We've got some contractors that have been in the same workplace for 3 to 4 years, but actually they're still genuinely outside contracts. It's just that that particular piece of work they're doing just keeps going. But actually they have all of the 3 pillars and all of the other factors. So time of work, we hear that a lot from contractors, say actually I'm only here for a week or 2 days. Well, actually it doesn't matter how long it is, it just depends on what you're doing in that workplace. Because if you're going in to do a sick cover where someone's sick, well actually you're doing the work of an employed person, so that would constitute an inside working practice. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
What happens if you are on a project and they just contact you next day again? And you're like, I delivered it on here for 3 days to do this work, and they're just simply extended.
So the more it's extended, the more it starts to fall inside. The real important thing you'll find around the contract is that they need to have a start and end date on now. So go on the days where you had rolling contracts where it just said, you know, you'll be here for 3 days, but actually we'll just keep renewing it and it will be a very loose contract. They will all need to have really strong start and end points. And if you finish at that point, then there needs to be another contract if you're carrying on. But it would be a brand new contract. It would be completely separate to the other one. Even if you've worked there for 6 months, you can do another 6 months. It would need to be a fresh contract that you're agreeing. There might be some changes into it, but you still need to make sure that all of the outside IR35 rules would be there. So as I said, those two are really black and white. They're very much in the contracts. There's no real argument with them. You can either leave or not, have notice periods, or have a substitute clause in there. The third one, control, is where the grey area really comes in. So what you need to do as a contractor is have as much control as possible. So you need to demonstrate when you're going into these workplaces that you're the one in control of the work that you're doing. It's not the other way around. The more control the contractor, the end client has over you, the more you look like an employee person. So we'll jump to the bottom two, the when and the where. They're extremely easy. So it's pretty much that. So do you as a contractor have control over where you work and when you work? So do you have to be on site all the time? Or can you work the hours that you want to work? And that's really the difference. By the way, I'll send these slides out to you, so you'll get them all. See you taking pictures. Flipping through them. So yeah, with the when and the where, it's very much around you should be able to demonstrate actually, can you work from home? It doesn't mean that you're definitely inside if you have to be in head office and you have to work 9 to 5, because sometimes that's just where you have to be to carry out the work. But if you can demonstrate that you've got some control over that, then it definitely helps. But those two are very much black and white again. Where the grey area comes in is the how and the what, and this is where HMRC have lost 12 of their last 15 tribunals where they've taken a contract to court. It shows that they don't have a good, very good reputation or a very good history of winning these cases. You could argue that maybe they don't know what they're doing either. They're winning, your contractors are winning it in 2 areas. The first one they're winning it in is mutuality of obligation. You're showing that actually you don't have to, you're not obliged to carry out extra work. So Lorraine Kelly is one case that you may have heard of. She's become quite famous through IR35. she demonstrated that actually she can pick and choose her work with ITV. So they may say to her, we want you to go to Gibraltar for the next week, and she'll say no. So she's showing that she hasn't got obligation to do the stuff that they're asking her to do outside of what she's already agreed. So if they ask you to go, I don't know, to Aberdeen for the week, then you can say no, or even if it's Reading, for instance. If you're based in London, then if you can say no, you're exercising your right of obligation. So around the how and the what, as I said, this is the really key area for you. And as I said, we'll go through why it's so great, but it's very much around what manner are you carrying the work out of and what type of work is it. So you need to exercise your right around how you're carrying out that work. So if somebody comes in and says, okay, design me this board, for instance, we want it to look exactly like this, we want you to use this font, this colour, and do it in this way, then you don't really have much control over that. Whereas if they say to you, we want you to deliver this for us and make it look a bit like this, but actually you're using your skill set to deliver whatever it is that you're delivering, and you'll show that you've got the control over it, then that shows that you have the control. Probably the simplest way to describe it would be a plumber. So I would bring a plumber into my house and say, I want you to do my bathroom, I want it to look like this, here's all the materials. However, that plumber has the control over how they deliver that and install my bathroom. So a bit like you guys, you're installing or you're creating whatever you're creating. If you can show that you're using your skills, maybe your software, anything like that, to show that you're using your skills, then it definitely shows that you have more control. But as you can imagine, it's quite grey, because if an end client says, but of course we want you to use this font, because that's the font that we have for our company, then you start to become restricted. But the more emphasis the end client puts on how you deliver your work, then the more control they have over you. So you want to be able to deliver as much as you can possibly with your control.
Sorry, how can you demonstrate that? Most of us probably work with brand guidelines all the time, so you could say we have restrictions in the way we work, but at the same time it's all up to our creativity to come up with ideas, even if we use the same assets.
Yeah.
Like,
So it's,
like you said, it's very grey, it's really hard to tell.
it's extremely grey, and this is what makes IR35 so difficult. I would love to just give you a tick box and say, tick all these boxes, and if you can tick them all, you're definitely outside, but it isn't that type, it is on an individual basis. So you'll go to one client where they will say, deliver this, and that's fine, and you'll be able to use your creativity and you'll be able to use your ideas. Whereas the next job you go to, it might not be, so it might be really restrictive, and they'll be saying, no, we need you to deliver it exactly like this, we just want you to do it because we need an extra pair of hands.
How do I demonstrate that?
So it's very much in the working practices, so it wouldn't be something you can demonstrate on paper or save to, say, when I was in this job I did this. It'd be very much around you, if you were questioned around how did you deliver that work, about you showing, actually, this is why I had control, because I used this, I used my software, or I came up with this and did this way. So it's really hard to put specifics on it, but that's why I sort of used a plumber. Or for instance, if you were in IT, they said, we want you to write this piece of code, but if they said, we want you to use this piece of code in this way, then you wouldn't really have control. But if they said, write this piece of code for us, then that would be perfect, because you would be demonstrating that your skill set, your knowledge and your qualifications is what's delivering that piece of work. Yes?
Sorry, two questions actually. First, sometimes when you're hired, you don't know what kind of work you're going to be doing. You're hired for your skills, and then you don't know what they're going to give you. So they might give you a mixture of both. So how do you demonstrate and what do you fall in or out and in this?
Yes, so what do you do if you get there and sometimes you aren't given the deliverables before you get there? It's very difficult. This one's really difficult for the agencies actually, because obviously they're going to try and advertise these roles beforehand, inside or outside of IR35. So they will need, and the end client will have to make that decision of whether this is inside or outside IR35. So they'll really have to give you deliverables. They might be quite broadly loose, but they are going to have to put some sort of deliverables in there to show why it's inside or outside. Yes?
How are they going to be able to enforce these?
How will they be able to enforce it? So this is what they're doing, so they've not been able to enforce it. That's why contractors have always been able to enforce it themselves. You've made the decisions. As I said, there's not enough HMRC inspectors out there to enforce it, which is why they've put these new rules in, and we will go into...
Are they going to go into the end clients and say, oh, you have to be contractors working right now?
Yes, so HMRC will sit in an end client's office and watch Firstly, we'll get on to where they're looking, but firstly they're looking in the contract, so we need to make sure the contracts are correct. Union Jackson are already working on their contracts, end clients are working on theirs. The issue is we've only been given draft legislation so far, so we can't really make the contract until we've got the full proposal, which we believe will be either mid-Feb or the start of March, which gives us effectively a month to get ready. One question I always get, which I probably should say now, is this going to happen? Because there's been a lot of rumours, will it not? We generally believe it will happen. If you look at the political parties, a lot of them during the election said they would either scrap it or they would review it. The Conservatives have said they'll review it, and in their documentation of what they're going to review, what they said is they're going to review the implementation, and they use the word implementation about 12 times. So that really gives you an idea of this is coming in because they want to implement it, and all they're going to do is be clear about how that's going to be delivered. The budget is the 11th of March, so we're very confident that it will come in on the 6th of April, so plan for that. And then if it is delayed, brilliant news, but we generally believe that it isn't going to be delayed, and that's the messages that we're getting from HMRC every single time they get asked it. Yes?
Just for clarity, you said that, if we can demonstrate that we're using our own software, so is that also things like bringing in our own laptop, using our own software programs, even if we do work on a project that is like, the brand guidelines are locked down, as long as we can demonstrate that, we use these tools that are ours, not the company's, does that help us?
It does help you if you can use your own equipment. Laptops is a bit of a divisive one, whether that counts or not, but it will come onto equipment in a second. But yeah, equipment is one of those that potentially, if you can use your own software, etc., it does help. What it did really help is you guys, when you demonstrate to HMRC why you're outside. It's not so much of a great demonstration for the end client to use it, and we'll come on to why in a second, but it was a really good tool for you guys to use. Any more questions on control?
Yeah, just one.
Yeah.
Say you were working on a project and you were under investigation, and they were suspected that you weren't in control of the project, or that you were just doing a build and you weren't using your own creativity or initiative. Is it up to you to prove that you did it, or up to them to disprove that you were under control of the project?
So HMRC have sent out 2 messages recently on this. So it used to be that HMRC would look at you guys and they would say, okay, I'm going to prove that you are inside IR35 when you've been working outside, and then we'll come after you for the tax. However, you might have heard of the GlaxoSmithKline case recently, where they sent out a letter to their 1,500 contractors and they said, we need you to prove to us that you are outside by this point in, I think it's mid-February, otherwise here's your tax bill. So they've completely changed the way they've done. They've never done that before. We generally think they're doing that because they've realistically only got up until April to come after the contractors, and then obviously it moves on to the end clients. We will come into a little bit more detail on that in a second, but yeah, realistically it's up for you would have to defend yourself, but they would try and also prove why you're inside.
So you're kind of guilty until you prove that you're yourself innocent?
You wouldn't have to pay the tax until they prove your guilt, I guess, if that's one way you want to mention it. So yeah, no, you wouldn't have to pay the tax until you prove that you're inside.
Okay.
But they would take you to court. Like you might need a lawyer assistance.
Yeah, they would take you to a tribunal at the minute, if obviously you argue it, which I would recommend that. As you've seen the cases that they've lost so far, if you were unfortunate to be one of those 1.2 million people that gets caught inside that 1.2 million, then yeah, argue it. But there's people out there that would help you. We would help you. We've got a team called Kudos that would help you as well. So if you need that, there's help out there for contractors. So we'll just move on to the other factors. So these are the areas where it's sometimes around your behaviours, things that you need to make sure you've got in place, things that end clients and agencies will now make sure you've also got in place. So part and parcel is around do you act like an employee? So do you enjoy the staff benefits? So unfortunately, if you go to the staff Christmas parties, if you enjoy staff free canteen meals, you shouldn't be taking those things anymore. They're for staff members. HMRC have used that in the past. They said, look, this guy's been to the last 3 Christmas dues. He's clearly a staff member. So we joke about it, but they are using those things. So if you go, don't put it on social media. But yeah, realistically, those are staff benefits. You shouldn't have access to them because you're a contractor. Traditionally, you are being paid a higher day rate to be there. So that should offset the fact. So go and buy your own sandwich. Other things such as line management. So you shouldn't be line managing anyone. By that we mean if you're delivering a project, of course you're going to be in charge of people and saying, I need this to be delivered, etc. But in terms of line management, what we mean is doing their appraisals, deciding what max rating they got at the end of the year and what their pay rise is going to be. Those things should be done by a permanent employee of the business, and you should be on organisational charts. You'll start to find things like, if you were working for Union Jackson, for instance, you were a contractor, it would now say, your email address would say unionjackson.external.com as opposed to just Union Jackson. You'll see those things start to come in. If you have a lanyard and you're in a big building, it should say contractor. It sounds silly, but those tiny little things really do make a difference because they're showing that you're being treated differently. That's really it around those. In terms of your own business account, please make sure you've got your own business account. Most people do, but there's the odd one that doesn't. You will find that agencies now will enforce the fact that you have your own business account. The minimum criteria is that you own 5% of your business. Hopefully you will earn more than that. But if you don't have your own business account, go and get one. Go set yourself on Company's House. Or if you can't, we'll do it for you. It doesn't cost anything. You need to carry your own financial risk as well now. So you'll be enforced around things like this. So the first thing around financial risk is make sure you have your public liability insurance, professional indemnity. It doesn't cost too much, but that could really be the difference between you being inside and outside. You need to demonstrate as a contractor, if you did make a mistake, you would be financially liable, which is why you need these things, and you'll find them written into the contracts now. So if you did make a mistake before, you might find that the agency or the end client mopped it up. Going forwards, it will be in the contract that actually you'll be financially liable, so you need to make sure you've got those things. The second part around this, which is quite unpopular with contractors, is if I go back to my plumber, if I had a leaky tap after a week, I would ring him up and say, come fix my tap. They would traditionally come out, do that for free. If you make a mistake within your businesses now, the business round IR35 and HMRC would expect you to go and fix that issue, and they wouldn't expect you to be charging a day rate, because you're going back and you're carrying your financial risk. If you did make a mistake, you should have to go back and fix that and not charge. Now, whether you do or not is up to you, and if the end client wants to pay you, but traditionally, IR35 wise, you shouldn't be going in and charging more. Then we'll move on to own equipment. So it's very sector to sector own equipment. You'll find in most places you're given, for instance, the laptop and say, here's all of the access. So you're very rarely allowed to use your own equipment. The printers, all of those things are there. But if you can demonstrate that you may be using your own software and stuff like that, it does help. But it's only a minor factor, so it's not the be-all and end-all around it that we hear sometimes. So don't get too hung up on the equipment side of things. And that is the other factor. So that makes up what is IR35. I've got a quick help and hinder for you there as well. So that just gives a one-page document. One thing we're finding is that end clients still aren't aware, or they're still not making the decisions of whether you're inside or out, because they don't know how to assess. They don't know what constitutes IR35. So if you speak to them, they don't understand, send them these things, and it will help them out, and it will potentially help you out. So as I said, there's two places that they're looking at HMRC. First place is they're looking in your contract, so that's whether they audit Union Jackson or they audit your end clients. They will look at the contracts and make sure they're IR35 friendly. If they're confident with them, they'll probably move on. But if there's an issue, they will look at the working practices and they will plonk themselves in an end client's office and just watch and interview you and ask you questions about the role you're doing.
And what happens if you work from home?
So if you work from home, great. Again, it's one way of exercising that you're outside because you're in control of where you work. So, but yeah, they would ask you questions around what you're doing. It might be you work from home, but they've got full control over you still in every other area. So you might be inside, but yeah, they would ask questions. So the current rules. So the current rules are really simple. You guys make the decision. So you guys are the ones deciding whether you're inside or outside IR35. And too common, I saw what I saw today, no one really knows whether they're inside or outside. Well, actually, if HMRC gave you a call tomorrow and said, are you inside or outside, you need to be able to prove that you're outside IR35 contractors. Now hopefully what we've gone through, there's a lot of those things you can exercise and say, actually, this is what I can demonstrate I'm outside of IR35. Some of you might be sitting there going, Jesus, I've probably been inside for a long time. We get that a lot. So, but you guys make the decision, but you guys also carry the liability. So if it's deemed that it would be an inside role, then you guys would be liable for the tax. So one of the good things that's coming out of IR35, and one of the only good things for contractors, is that you will no longer be liable. So if you do get an outside role, and it is later down the line deemed inside, HMRC aren't going to ask you for the tax. You're fine, you probably won't even know it's happened. They come after the fee payer, whoever's paid you that amount of money, which in most cases would be the agency, or if you work directly with an end client there. So as I said, they couldn't get through to those 1.2 million people, so they decided in the public sector they'd try it out first, and in HMRC's eyes it's been the biggest success story so far they've had in terms of recouping tax. It's very, you can sort of argue it because they're taking tax out of the public sector already, so they're just robbing Peter to pay Paul, but they can't wait to get it into the private sector. They believe they're going to earn around £4 billion in the next 2 years. So a lot of money. When Boris Johnson's promising to build 40 hospitals, well, there's the money. So you can see why they want to get it in the public sector, they believe they've earned around £550 million in extra revenue over the past 3 years. So a lot of money. So the public sector, what they did is they decided, okay, we're going to take the responsibility and the decision making away from the contractor. So you no longer have a choice in whether the role is inside or outside. It is all down to the end client. So the NHS and the public sector, for instance, they now make the decision with their workforce, this is inside or this is outside. The issue with the public sector is they weren't given enough time. They weren't afforded the time like we've had today. They were told very late in the day, actually these are the rules and this is how you have to adhere to it. They couldn't assess their workforce. So what we saw in pretty much every single public sector area was blanket approaches. So they said, okay, you are now all inside. We're not deeming you outside or looking at you as an individual. We're just saying everyone's in. So that caused a number of issues. As you imagine, it upset the workforce. A lot of contractors moved over to the private sector where they could still get these outside roles, and it caused genuine issues for projects and programs over the whole of the public sector market. Our public sector agencies still struggle with this to get really good contractors in, because unless it's outside of IR35, a lot of these contractors will just stay in the private sector. The issue for you guys is you haven't got a private sector to go and find. So your choice now will be to look for outside of IR35 roles, or as we'll come on to in a second, small companies. Any questions around that? Yes?
Yes, so I spoke to a friend who had a job offer from another agency, and then they said, you can only take this job if you are umbrella company, because they were public sector. And she told me this, I was like, that's ridiculous. That's not possible. Of course they can hire limited people. Is that probably what happened?
Absolutely, yeah, completely true. It's what we saw, and if I'm honest, that's what we're seeing in the private sector already. We're working with a lot of the end clients who are very contractor heavy, and a lot of them are deciding, unfortunately, to go down the route of just putting people inside, because they're taking the liability now over the tax. They've decided, actually, we're just going to put you inside because it's ease. The contract managers go, great, you're inside. In their mind, perfect. What they're not thinking about is you guys and what the potential issues are there. But in their mind, yes, Julia.
Sure. For Christmas, I heard something from another client.
Yeah.
That he was told that the whole of WPP had announced that every single contractor looking, they were just going to blanket it inside.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of their legislation and safety. And
Yeah.
they weren't even going to analyse it.
Yeah, so they won't be able to do that. They will have to analyse on a case-by-case basis, which is great news for you guys. In the public sector, there wasn't these rules. The only rule that was there is they had to take reasonable care. So they ignored it and they just said, right, everyone's in. There are some rules coming into the private sector that means they won't be able to just put these blanket bans in place, because they are giving you some rights to argue this, and they are giving some onus on the end clients, which we'll come on to now, in terms of what they have to deliver to you as a message as to why you're inside. They will have to explain it, instead of just giving you a piece of paper, say you're inside, and if you say, why am I inside, they're like, because that was easier for us. They're not going to be able to do that anymore, because a compliance manager says it's the greatest idea. So They're the current rules in the public sector, and they are going to come into the private sector. So we'll come on to what's been legislated. But in terms of your question around when an end client says you have to go umbrella, actually what we find is most agencies don't have a PAYE solution, so they can't pay you, which is why we exist. Most umbrella companies started 20 years ago as a solution to IR35 for employment agencies, because what we do is we take you on as an employee, we take off all the taxes and national insurance, and the money that you have is then your money. Because most agencies don't have a solution to pay you, then that's where we come in. So you will find that most agencies going forward, if you're outside, perfect, work as you are for your limited company, but if you're going to do an inside role, you'll more than likely find they'll say, go speak to these umbrella companies.
Just one question. Could you do both inside and outside IR35 roles? So you could run a limited company alongside an umbrella company?
Yes, you can. In that case, we recommend that you always have a contractor specialist accountancy firm with you, and you're not using your high street accountant, because it is very difficult for them to work out what they're doing in terms of that, because they have to control every single sort of accountancy rules out there, whereas we're very specific to that. But we have contractors in the public sector that are doing 2 days on an inside role and 3 days on an outside role. At the minute. So it might not even be that you're doing 6 months in and then 6 months out. It could be that you're running 2 concurrent contracts at the same time, one's in, one's out, and you're being taxed differently.
So how does that affect your tax if you do 6 months inside between PAYE?
Yeah.
But as a limited company, we all consistently pay ourselves a monthly salary regardless.
Yeah.
So even with the 6 months we're working inside, where we're paying PAYE, we'd still be paying ourselves our monthly salary. So at the end of the year, our tax return will still come in, which then probably push our tax returns up, which then boosts our taxable earnings.
Yeah, so
you've got to continue paying yourself, so the company not pay yourself.
Depends how you want to do it. You can take a break. What a lot of people do is they put their limited account into dormancy if they know they're going to be inside for 6 months. You can bring it straight back out. But yeah, there's a number of ways to concurrently run both. It's just a headache for your accountant, basically. It's an absolute nightmare for them to work out. But it might mean that you need to keep more back for the end of the year, because you know that tax bill might be more, but obviously you're offsetting it on the PAYE work that you're doing where you are paying tax, so you work it out. So the draft legislation. So with the draft legislation, this is what we've seen so far, and we're very confident that this will not change. Unless HMRC throw a complete curveball, these will be the rules. So the first rule that's really important is the small companies exemption. So small companies are not going to be hit by the new IR35 changes. So what that means is if you work for a small company and that is constitutes 10.2 million turnover, 5.1 million business assets by 50 employees, if they fall under that, then they're a small company. It means that you guys as contractors still make that decision as to whether you are inside or outside IR35, so you still have the control. So small companies aren't affected by this. It's only medium to large companies that this new rule will be imposed upon, and they'll need to make the decision. So one thing I get from contractors is they say, well, I'm going to only work for small companies. It's great if you can do it, but it's going to be difficult because, as you can imagine, every single one of you are ideally going to be working for small companies. There's only so many small companies with so many jobs.
Can I ask a question about charities?
So charities are a bit of an anomaly. There's certain rules on charities of where they fall inside or outside scope. It's normally around freedom of information, so on their website it will say whether they have to comply with freedom of information or not. If they have to comply with freedom of information, then they will be deemed inside scope. It's sort of the easiest way we've found to clarify that, but the charities do know. They've been able to check. It's not been easy for them to find out whether they're inside or outside, but they do know, so they will advertise as such. Going forward. So yeah, small companies, it's quite a good exception. We're really happy that's in there. The next one is the fee payer responsibility. So as I said, it's great for you guys if you get an outside role now, because you are no longer liable for the tax if it's then deemed inside in 4 years' time. You don't have to worry about it. Who does have to worry about, however, is the person who pays you, and most of the time that is an agency that pay you or the client direct. So what you can imagine is that agencies are quite nervous about this because the end clients are making the decision, but it falls on the liability of the agency if the end client gets it wrong. So it's really not fair on companies like Union Jackson, which is why you can be sure people like Tony are already working on this and making sure that actually the role will be inside or outside correctly. It's why people like Tony are going up to their own clients and asking, what are you doing about this? How are you making your determinations? We're seeing a lot. So we're seeing a lot of pressure from the agencies now, but we need you guys as contractors to help and start asking your own clients how are they making these determinations. Another bit of bad news for you, there was a thing called a 5% allowance in the public sector where you could, it cost money to try and change the way you're working, so they gave you this 5% allowance. Unfortunately that's going, so if you do hear anyone say, well, you can get this 5% allowance in your take-home pay where you can offset some of your costs, you can't anymore, it's on 100% of your earnings. Sorry. The next two are the real key areas for you guys. So this is what gives you guys and the agency some power back. So as I said, in the public sector, they just put these blanket approaches in where they said everyone's in without any justification. They will be able to, you guys will be able to challenge them going forward. What they also do is they have to issue you guys and the agencies an SDS or a status determination. So that's 2 pages or a page worth of information as to why they've deemed you in or out, and they have to do that in every single role, every single time. If they don't do that, then the liability sits with them, so you can be pretty sure that they are going to fill out this SDS and they are going to give you a reason as to why they deemed you inside and deemed you outside. Now undoubtedly, if they want to put you inside, it is pretty easy. They just say, we're not giving you substitution, we're putting a notice period on, and we're taking full control. So if they do want to put you inside, then they can do, but they will have to issue you this document so you can understand it. The other part that isn't in the public sector, which is great, is you guys will be able to appeal that decision. So you'll be able to say to the end client, I fundamentally disagree with this. Now obviously, unless you're completely mad, you're not going to dispute an outside decision going forwards, but you will dispute some of the inside decisions. It's not something that HMRC are going to get involved in. It is going to be down to you and the end client discussing, actually, I disagree why you've given me an inside decision for these reasons, and then it's up to you and them to come back and mediate whether you think that you're in or out. What they do have though is they have to give you a decision within 45 days. Now, unfortunately, in your sector, you'll be long gone by then. You'll have already paid the tax on it. We've asked HMRC, how would you then recoup that tax? Now, we're guessing it'll be in your tax return at the end of the year, but they haven't given us an answer on that one yet because that one didn't come up in the public sector. So we shall see. But at least you do have some element of right to disagree. And in all honesty, we believe that most end clients won't take 45 days to come back to you, because if you're paid on a weekly basis, that's 7 weeks that you could have gone by paying too much tax. They'll come back to you a lot quicker. Any questions on those? Yes?
So kind of similar like the question I asked earlier about went for this company that said they only work with people with umbrella companies. I mean, is it kind of one of those instances where like a contract does come up and they say, actually we can't work with you because you might be inside? Can we go back to them and say, can you provide us this SDS? And
so they'll have to deliver you the SDS before you start. So before you agree the contract or the first day before you get there, then they'll have to give you this document. They will be giving you this document. Now, in terms of when they say we can't work with you, you will be dictated to, unfortunately, how you have to work now. So you won't really have an option of how you work. It will be right, you either go this way or that way. Whether if you're outside, perfect, carry on as you are, not an issue. But if you're inside, it's very unlikely going to let you work for your limited company still. Some might let you work for your limited company. You can work for your limited company if you're inside IR35, just to confuse things. However, as I've mentioned, the fee payer is responsible, the agency or the end client, to make sure that all tax and national insurance is paid. So they will pay you into your limited account, but it'll have had every single deduction taken off already, so there's no point in going into your limited account. You may as well give them your personal account details and say, pay it into there. You also lose out on things like employment rights if you work for a limited company. We saw a few contractors in the public sector say, I'm going to work for my limited company still. However, they quickly moved over to umbrella or agency PAYE because they realised they're getting employment benefits, etc. They're getting stuff like pensions where they're not as a limited company. Yes?
Hi, just on that issue, so I spoke to my accountant recently about that. And I said, well, how much is going to say limited company? But do on the side, I said, yeah, you just sign up for payroll bureau, pay a fee, and pay yourself payroll every month.
No, it doesn't. It's sort of the red herring in terms of the options. It is an option there, but every single deduction has to be taken off before you receive those funds. So that's both national insurances, that's your tax contributions, apprenticeship levy, all of those sorts of things will be taken off beforehand. So actually, those funds that do go into your limited company, it's had everything off. So why have it there? You may as well just move it straight over to your personal account because it's had all the deductions taken off already, and it's taken off before you even have a chance to claim back expenses and stuff, which you can do through an umbrella again. So the advice really is that, and also what you'll find is most agencies are not set up. In fact, 95% of agencies are not set up to take all of the taxes and national insurance off they need to for you to work for your limited company. So you just won't be an option. They'll just say no, you can't do that. They're very much in their right to do so. Yes.
So I was with a limited company for a while, and it was fine because the tax was being paid and things. And then I think the year that I got permanent, but 2 years ago they mailed me and said, hey, changing the rules are changing, you can't claim any of these expenses anymore.
Yep. So I mean, in terms of
you just said that you could claim expenses, but I was told I couldn't.
No,
they changed it again, or?
We won't get into too much, but there are certain rules around expenses. They've already squeezed you guys. So working for a limited company wasn't attractive already as it was 15 years ago. They've already squeezed you on your dividends, etc., and expenses. There's a supervision directive for control ruling out there, which means that if you're inside that, then you can't claim certain expenses. If you're out, then you can. We're very robust through our techniques to make sure that if you can, we're very upfront to say, right, well, you can claim these expenses, or you can't if you're not able to. We take you through that. But yeah, there are certain expenses you can claim, certain ones you can't.
If the HMRC inspector deems you to be in breach of IR35 and takes you to court,
yep.
Apart from having to pay the taxes that you owe, is there any other financial penalties as well to go on top?
Potentially they could fine you, but most of the time it's just, so if they take you to court and they ask, they find you inside when you should have been outside, they'll go after you just for the tax.
But for the new one, we shouldn't have to worry about that because it's on the end client.
Exactly that, yeah. It's on the end client going forward.
So,
however, anything historic they look at is potentially on you. One question that I get asked quite a lot from contractors is, what about if I've been working inside over the past 6 years and they look at me now? HMRC said there's going to be a huge swing in people working outside IR35 going inside after April. So if HMRC were clever, they could probably get a report together and go, right, let's go after this group of individuals. What they said is they're not going to use this tool as a way to go after retrospective action. However, they have said that they would never rule it out. They have to say they wouldn't rule it out, because if there was a clear flaunt of the rules, then they potentially would go after you, but they have said they're not going to use it to retrospectively go back. So that's as much comfort as I can give you, but it's not as comforting as I'd like to be able to say. Absolutely not. Come April, there's an amnesty and you'll never have to worry about your previous tax arrangement. However, HMRC have not said that they wouldn't go after you, which is not great. Yes?
Because I work directly with certain creative agencies or directly with clients, should we need to get first in touch with them to ask them what's going to happen to my contract?
Yeah, so your current contracts as they stand now, so would you get in contact with an agency or an end client? So the current contracts you're in now, if they take you past April, absolutely, start questioning them. How are you making this decision and what are you ruling me as? Are you ruling me inside or outside? Start to understand that. Business as usual going forwards will be that the roles will be advertised as such. So you'll be able to go onto whatever jobs boards you look at and you'll be able to see, okay, that role's advertised as outside, that job will get 5,000 CVs, and then a job inside will not get as many. But at the minute, yeah, you need to speak to your clients now if you're going to go past April, and they really should be telling you now to give you a good as informed choice as possible to understand whether you want to carry on that role if it's deemed inside. Any more questions? Look, fab. How to prepare. We'll come on to that now. One thing that I've taken out the slides is how do they make these assessments, the end clients at the minute. So there's a thing called Assess Tool, Check Employment Status Tool. Now this is HMRC's tool, where you go on, you answer 16 questions, and it will tell you whether you're inside or outside. So sounds like the perfect solution. This is all I need to do, this is all the end client needs to do. However, it's not, we really don't understand how the tool is fair. It's very much weighted around right of substitution, which it asks questions like, do you have an unfettered right to substitute? If you answer no to that question, it basically puts you inside. It's weighted to put you inside from the logarithm. And the other issue is it doesn't take into mutuality of obligation. So as we said, that's one of the 3 key pillars, but it doesn't ask a single question about it because HMRC always assumes obligation is there. And again, this is why contracts are winning their tribunals, because they're showing actually there wasn't obligation. The other issue with CEST is that in 15% of cases it gives an I don't know, an indeterminate decision. Well, what are you or the end client meant to do with that? Naturally, the end client is going to be risk averse and they're going to go, we'll put that one inside because we're not going to take the risk. The other issue with CEST tool, NHS Digital have been using the CEST tool the whole time. They've now just been fined £4.5 million because they've been putting roles outside, and HMRC have decided that the questions were incorrect, how they were answering them. They should have been inside, and they've got this £4.5 million bill, which is not great. So if your end client say to you, we're using the CEST tool, say, really? Is that how, like, you may as well just go inside now. Okay, so how to prepare. So firstly, understand your statuses. What I would recommend is, I've just sort of ripped it to shreds, but go and have a look on the CEST tool. If HMRC asked you right now, that would be the first thing you really need to go do, is understand whether you're inside or outside. So have a play around with it. It's called CEST. It's on their website. It's 16 questions. It takes 20 minutes. It's worth a go. And if you get an outside ruling in that, fantastic. Go and show your employer and say, look, this is an outside ruling. Let's make sure we keep it that way after April. More than likely it'll be inside though. You also need to understand, as I said, what constitutes inside, outside. Hopefully I've given you some brief ideas around that today. I've also mentioned around changing behaviours, so in terms of running like a contractor, make sure you've got your insurances in place, make sure you're understanding that you can't start taking those staff perks, etc. Really assert yourself as a contractor in that business. So if you can work from home 1 day a week, exercise the right to do so. If you don't have to, you're in control of the times that you come in. Again, maybe mix it up. Don't come in at 9 o'clock every day. Come in at 10 past 9. Be wild. But then show that you've got control. Understand your roles again. Understand actually what does the end client want from you. A lot of the time you have your deliverables in place, but then you just get on with the work. Or as you said earlier on, you get in there and the work changes. You need to be strong with, actually, I've come in to do this piece of work. That's what I'm there to do. If you want me to do this other piece of work, and I know that wouldn't be an easy conversation, but make sure it's in the contract, and that would still keep it outside of IR35. One thing I'll talk about umbrellas, I promised I wouldn't, but this one is actually quite important. It's not me selling umbrellas, but when it hit in the public sector, a huge amount of umbrellas suddenly cropped up out of nowhere. What I would recommend is going with established umbrellas like Parasol, but there's a lot of us out there that are established and long term, and we do pay your tax correctly. The issue we found in the public sector is a lot of these umbrellas popped up and they say to you, we can get you 95% take-home pay. Well, there's a reason why. There's no legitimate way that they can do that. As so boring it is, tax is tax. It has to be paid. There's no way around that. So if they're offering you these schemes, be careful. What we're now seeing in the public sector is HMRC have shined a light on these, and they're going back to nurses, for instance, and they're getting £30,000-40,000 tax bills that they're just not able to pay. And it is completely unfair on the contractors, because a lot of them did genuinely believe, unfortunately, that this was a true legal scheme, because these uncompliant umbrellas were telling them, well, don't believe it. There's an option called FCSA, that is the highest accreditation that umbrellas can have. We're in that FCSA, but there's 31 of us in there. That should be enough choice for you to find the right umbrella for you. But ultimately, umbrellas should all be paying you pretty much the same, because again, all we're doing is we're taking off the tax, we're taking off whatever we charge, and that is it. The rest of it is your money. So we shouldn't really, there shouldn't be too much difference between any of us. It should really be on service. One thing you need to do is, if you are going to be caught inside, or you think you may be inside, start to understand what that actually means as take-home pay. If you go onto our website or any of the others, you can quickly put in your day rate and it will spit out what roughly your take-home pay will be. I would implore you to go and look at something like that to really get an idea of actually if I'm inside, can I pay my mortgage? Can I live the lifestyle that I still lose? Because you will take home less money than on a limited contract. It might not be as much as you think. It might only be a little bit. It really depends on your personal situation, which is why it's worth getting a personal quote. But you do need to understand actually, can I live on that? Or do I need to up my day rate? Do I need to change the way I'm working? Or is that okay? That's finally it. I mentioned the uplift as well. And as I said, we are going to see unprecedented amounts. It's going to go mental and it's going to be extremely busy. We're already seeing unprecedented amounts of inquiries. In the public sector, we normally help about 70 contractors a day with their umbrella or limited needs. It went up to 1,100 people for about 6 weeks. It was chaos. So if you find that you are going to be inside, just set yourself up a little bit earlier than the 1st of April because you're going to find it pretty hard come the 1st of April. On to some frequently asked questions I get. So the first one is, what if I work multiple assignments? We sort of covered that one. So if you work multiple assignments, it is a good case to say, actually, I'm in control of the work I do. If you can pick, I'm going to work here on the Tuesday and here on the Thursday, it helps your case. However, it's on the individual assignment. So you might find that if you work 3 at once, 2 might be inside and 1 might be outside. It's not because I work multiple assignments, I'm definitely outside on all of them, which is what we hear a lot of. Can HMRC go back retrospectively? So I've sort of covered that. Technically, they've said that they wouldn't use this to retrospectively go back, but I would never rule it out. So don't sit comfortably thinking April's come, whoopee, I've been inside the whole time. What if I think I'm outside now? So I've sort of mentioned that, or if I'm inside now. So if you are sitting there and you look at those slides thinking, Jesus, I'm probably inside, but actually maybe start to look at what you could do, move over early, or enjoy it till up to April. One thing you need to make sure you do by April is get all of your timesheets in. The way it works come the 6th of April, if that is the date, which we're confident it will be, is it's any monies paid after that point. So make sure that you've got your pay runs in, your timesheets in, so you do get paid as much as you can, because if you get paid after the 6th of April, then that falls inside of scope. You'll find that you're not going to get as much as you were hoping for. What if inside, should I look at uplifts? This is one thing we're seeing in the market at the minute with my end clients. It's a bit of chicken at the minute. They're saying that they're not going to uplift in most cases. Some are saying, okay, we'll uplift for national insurance.
What is uplift?
Uplift is how much should you uplift your rate by to be on the same pay that you're on at the minute. So traditionally, to be the same as an umbrella to limited worker, if you want to get it back up to your limited amount, you should be uplifting by roughly 25%, which is a heck of an uplift. But that would get you on roughly, depending on how you're working your limited account, about the same. So what should you do? Should you ask for uplifts? Absolutely go and ask for them. If end clients want to keep you, then maybe they should be looking at that. But at the minute, they're saying that they're not going to uplift at all. The rate they're giving you is your day rate, and however you've been taxing yourself has always been up to you. But we will see what happens come April, whether they decide to uplift or not. Because if you've got a valuable skill to that company and they want to keep you, they might have to. Can I take roles inside and outside? We've sort of covered that one as well. So yes, you can. You can take multiple roles in and out. It just means you need to work out how you pay your tax. So you might go half the year umbrella and then half the year limited. It just depends how that works. And then will I earn more going perm? So it's more of a question for Union Jackson, that traditionally you're there for a short term, you are paid a little bit more. So we actually see a lot of people that went inside to go permanent in the public sector suddenly came back out. So you just really need to make sure, actually, is this right for me to go perm? And for some people it will be, they might want to go back to that security. And if you do, then obviously Union Jackson and your agencies are the people you need to speak to about that. That is it. Any questions? Yes.
Yes. So for example, you are asked what your rates are for a job. You tell them what your rates are, and then they give you the contract, and you find out that you're inside and you want to uplift.
Yeah.
It's too late.
So what you will find going forwards is, if they're asking for you to do a job, they'll have already made that decision. They'll say this is an inside role,
Okay.
so you might have two rates, and you go, okay, that's an inside role, so this is my day rate to justify my extra cost in tax. So you might find that actually you have two rates, and if you're lucky, then you've uplifted your rate. You might try and get away with it on your outside roles, and then you're even anymore. But we're really unsure, and so are most of the recruitment sector of what will happen with rates. They've been very static in your sector, we found, for a long time. Whether they'll stay that way, we don't know. We will see what happens. We can't really judge. Yes.
So if I have a contract outside of IR35,
Yeah.
using my limited company, say with Union Jackson would continue to pay my limited company, and I'd be liable for my own tax and everything like that.
Yes.
The next role if I is inside IR35,
Yep.
and I have to be signed up with you as an umbrella company.
Yep.
Does that affect my limited company status? My limited company signing up with you?
No, so your limited company, unless,
Separate.
yeah. I mean, we can say Parasol, Clear Sky. So Parasol is our umbrella model. Clear Sky is our limited account option. That's just like your high street accountant. We are just purely a limited contractor. So if you work for your limited company still, there's no need to approach us unless you want our fantastic service. But ultimately, yeah, if you've got a good accountant and you're outside, stay with them.
Right.
Yes.
In case, for example, if you are hired for a contract with a certain job, and you pay instead of a daily rate, like one fee, would that be, would that consider, would that look like more being outside of IR35 or?
Sorry, so if you've got like just a second job.
No, for example, you are on a contract, but you are contracted to certain newspaper, let's say, and you are not getting paid by a day rate, but you are paid to do the illustration.
Okay, so yeah, so it's a statement of work almost. So you're paid that piece of work. So one thing we are seeing in the market is statement of work slowly creeping in. So actually they want you to do deliverables, and that definitely helps with outside roles. If it will pay you on this thing, because actually you're then showing that you've got financial risk, because if you don't complete it, you don't get paid, or if it takes longer again. So yeah, if you work that way, then that definitely helps as an outside role. If it's you're paid on these deliverables and we'll only pay you on these tranches, then yeah, absolutely, that would help. But again, they could still say, the end client could still say, we want you to deliver this, we're going to pay you at the end, but we're still deeming you inside. It would still be up to them to make that decision. Yes.
Just for instance, I've been a freelance for a good many years, and you've probably come across some contractors who've done roles for the same company, where it's just rolled and rolled for years and years, and they call them permanences. These guys, even if they demonstrate control, say for instance working at home 1 day a week, are they in danger of falling inside IR35 because they haven't shown or demonstrated variety of employment over the year?
So yeah, I hear permalance a lot, especially in your industry. Technically, yeah, we've got a lot of guys sitting there, and a lot of the end clients have actually gone to them already because they don't want to lose them. So traditionally, they've offered them permanent roles and said, you've worked for us for the last 5 years, come on board finally. And for end clients, if they've always wanted that person on board, it's a great opportunity for them now to say, sort of tighten the screw and say, come on, jump over and come perm. Time is not a huge factor. You notice I didn't mention it at all, whether you've worked there 5 years or 1 week, it doesn't technically make a difference.
So you don't have to show variety of employment over the 12 months?
No, you don't have to. You could work for the same place for a year, but you just really need to demonstrate, as I've mentioned, those 3 areas and the other factors around this is why I'm outside. So you could work for somewhere for 2 years, and it could be, you start off there only for 6 months and then it keeps getting extended. But as long as you can show and demonstrate those key pillars around IR35, it can still be outside. But it is starting to tell a story that you're acting more like an employee. You're starting to be dragged in the more you are there.
So is it better to have multiple contracts with multiple agencies at the same time? Like, you have a contract, for instance, with an agency, and there's not an end date. Like, I keep working for them on a weekly basis. They give me different projects because they don't have a creative department inside.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I work with other clients. So, and I work from home.
Yeah. What you'll find is the end client making that decision now. So even if you've got 5 different agencies and 5 different end clients, they're all going to have to make a determination on that particular piece of work or job that you do for that end client. So again, you might have 3 end clients saying, right, actually the work you do, we've decided you're inside, but you might have two that go, we're happy that they're outside.
You're saying they more tend to go for the inside part because it's easier for their
Yes.
than the
We-
other thing. Will they cost more for them to?
Technically, yes. It depends whether they want to uplift your rate or not. It won't cost them any more if they say you're inside, but your day rate's still your day rate. No more cost for them. But if they want to keep you, or they start to see that actually they're losing people because another agency are offering more because they have uplifted, and you all start going there, well then they're going to have to uplift. So it really depends on the end client, and obviously it's the end client that uplifts.
Being inside doesn't necessarily mean that you get any benefit from their company, right?
No, so if you're inside, you're deemed inside, so you're deemed as a disguised employee or an employee. You're not getting any employment rights from that end client still. You're just still getting the day rate, so you're sort of lose-lose, you're not getting the benefits.
Yeah.
That's why they're saying go to an umbrella company, because then you do get employment benefits, so you do get your statutory sick pay, pensions, etc., which is again why they exist.
Do sole traders fall under any of this?
Sole traders are effectively already in IR35, so they changed the rules around sole traders a few years ago. What we find, and personally from accountancy side, what we advise actually is that end clients won't work with sole traders anymore. You'll see that there's a real appetite for them not to. The only ones that do are normally the ones that don't know about the sole trader rules, so keep working with them until they do. But ultimately, as a sole trader, they run the risk if you do not pay the right level of tax. They're liable. So what we find with sole traders is when that rule was introduced, most agencies and clients said we won't work with sole traders anymore, and we'll slowly see the death of the sole trader. Even though it has reduced considerably already, and there's only a few left. If any of you are in there, it's going down. Any more? Yes.
Will it affect the way you work with overseas clients? Is that like a regulation?
Overseas clients, yeah, you can go overseas. What we've with the rules around overseas is we asked HMRC this, and at first they went, oh, I don't know, because in the public sector there are no overseas clients really, bar very minimal. In the private sector it was a big question because there's a lot of people. I work with a lot of oil and gas companies. The ruling will be that you will have to, if you work for an end client that is based in France, you're going to have to, or the agency, you're going to have to say to that company in France, can you decide whether this person is in or out for a UK tax law? Now they'll probably go, no. But, sorry. They probably will say, no, I have no clue. Which means that what we'll probably see is the agencies are going to have to make that decision because they're sort of the first person in the UK making that decision. But if you're paying UK tax on that money, you're taking it in this country, then it will be affected by IR35. We're also seeing that if some people have said, especially in oil and gas, well, I'm going to go live and work in Spain. What we're actually seeing is that these rules are being implemented all over Europe. They're not called IR35, but we're seeing them in similar names and similar rules come all across Europe. Any more questions? Nope? All good? I will send these out to you, or I'll get Union Jack to send them out, read through them all. Have questions if you want. It's got my details, my mobile number on my email. If you have any questions at all, you're struggling with end clients and they need help, and you're like, right, speak to this person who will try and get you outside, because I will do my best, then give them my details. I'm more than happy to speak to anyone. Yeah, if that's all, I will let you get back to your link.
Okay, there's more drinks and pizzas at the back, so help yourself, and there's more pizzas on the way actually. For anyone who wants to stick around and digest what they've heard. People looking a bit shattered, earth shattered, so thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. So please, go, relax, chat. Cry.